shock hit me like a freight train. Mary's words sliced through the warm chatter of our family dinner, sharp and cold. I think only people who can't make it in school end up in the military. My fork froze midair. The clink of glasses and soft laughter from moments before vanished. My eyes locked on Mary, my daughter-in-law, sitting there with a smug little smile like she'd just dropped some profound truth. I couldn't believe it. My heart pounded, not from anger yet, but from pure disbelief. This was my home, my table, my family, and she just insulted my son Bradley, the man who gave everything for this country. I set my glass down slow, my hand steady, but my chest tight. I looked across the table at my husband George, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. My daughter Sarah stared at her plate, her cheeks flushed. Nobody said a word. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. I'm Patricia, 63 years old, from Louisiana. That night was supposed to be a celebration. Bradley, my only son, had been gone for 3 years, stationed overseas, and we'd finally gotten word he was coming home. Not just for a visit, but for good. He'd served his time in the army, a captain who'd led men through hell and back, and now he was ready to start a new chapter. We'd planned this dinner for weeks. I'd spent all day in the kitchen making his favorites: fried catfish, hush puppies, and pecan pie. The house smelled like love, like home. Mary, his wife, had been living with us for the last year while Bradley was deployed. She'd moved in to help out, she said, but mostly she just came and went, as she pleased, leaving dishes in the sink and her laundry for me to fold. I didn't mind too much. She was Bradley's wife, and I wanted to keep the peace. But that comment at dinner, that was a line crossed. The table stayed quiet, too quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second stretching longer than the last. I wanted to say something to fire back, but my throat felt stuck. George cleared his throat like he was about to speak, but then stopped. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide, like she was begging me to fix this. Mary just sat there sipping her wine like nothing was wrong. I felt the weight of every eye on me, waiting for what I'd do. I couldn't let it slide. Not this. Not about Bradley. I pushed my chair back, slow the scrape of wood against the floor, loud in the silence. "Excuse me," I said, my voice low but firm. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a piece of paper from the counter. My hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. I scribbled a note fast, my pen pressing hard enough to tear the paper. "If that's true, then my son, who fought for your freedom so you could sit here eating this dinner, must be the weakest of all." I folded it, tucked it under my napkin, and walked back to the table. I didn't sit down. I looked at Mary, her smile gone now, her eyes darting like she knew she'd gone too far. "I need some air," I said, and walked out the back door into the humid Louisiana night. The screen door slammed behind me. I stood on the porch, my arms crossed, staring at the fireflies flickering in the yard. My chest heaved like I'd run a mile. I wasn't just mad, I was hurt. Bradley had given up so much. He'd missed birthdays, holidays, his own wedding anniversary to serve. And Mary, who'd never known a day of sacrifice, sat there judging him like he was some dropout who couldn't hack it. I wanted to scream, to march back in and tell her exactly what I thought of her. But I didn't. Not yet. I knew this wasn't just about one comment. This was about everything that had been building for months, maybe years. Inside, I heard voices, low at first, then louder. Sarah's voice, sharp and quick. "Mary, what the hell was that?" Mary's response was too soft to catch, but it sounded defensive. George said something gruff, his words muffled. I didn't go back in. I needed to think, to figure out how to handle this without tearing the family apart. Bradley was coming home in 2 days. 2 days. I couldn't let this ruin his return. But I also couldn't let Mary's words hang there unchallenged. I leaned against the porch railing, the wood cool under my palms, and closed my eyes. The night was warm, the air thick with the smell of jasmine and river mud. I thought about Bradley at 18, signing up for the army, proud and nervous, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I thought about the letters he sent from Iraq, the ones I read over and over until the paper wore thin. I thought about the man he'd become, strong, steady, selfless. And I thought about Mary, who'd never understand any of it. The back door creaked open. Sarah stepped out, her face pale. "Mama, you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded but didn't look at her. "She didn't mean it," Sarah said, though her tone said she didn't believe it. "She's just Mary. You know how she is." I turned to her, then my eyes sharp. "I know exactly how she is," I said. "And I'm not letting this go." Sarah bit her lip like she wanted to say more but didn't. She hugged me quick, then went back inside. I stayed out there a while longer, letting the night settle my nerves. When I finally went back in, Mary was gone. George said she'd left, said she had a headache. The note I'd written was still under my napkin, untouched. I slipped it into my pocket. This wasn't over. The next morning I woke up early, the house still quiet. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note I'd written. I didn't know if I'd give it to Mary or not. Part of me wanted to shove it in her face, make her read it, and see the hurt she'd caused. Part of me wanted to let it go to keep things calm for Bradley's sake. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't stay silent. Not just for Bradley, but for me. I'd spent too long biting my tongue around Mary, letting her little jabs and careless comments slide. This was bigger. This was about respect, about family, about everything I'd fought for as a mother. I heard footsteps and looked up. George shuffled in his hair, still mussed from sleep. "You sleep okay?" he asked, pouring himself a coffee. I shrugged. "Not really." He sat across from me, his eyes searching my face. "You gonna talk to her?" he asked. I nodded slow. "Yeah, but not yet. I need to figure out what to say." George sipped his coffee, then said, "She's young, Pat. She doesn't get it. Doesn't mean she's right, but maybe she didn't mean it the way it came out." I looked at him, my jaw tight. "Doesn't matter how she meant it, George. It's what she said. And it's what she thinks." He didn't argue. He knew me well enough to know when I'd made up my mind. That day I kept busy cleaning the house, prepping for Bradley's return. I didn't see Mary. She stayed in her room most of the day, only coming out to grab a sandwich and head back upstairs. I didn't push it. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. But every time I passed her door, I felt that knot in my chest tighten. By evening, I was exhausted, not just from the work, but from carrying the weight of what had happened. I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come. I lay there thinking about Bradley, about the man he'd become, about the sacrifices he'd made. And I thought about Mary, who'd never know what it meant to put someone else first. The next day was Bradley's homecoming. I woke up with a mix of excitement and dread. I wanted everything to be perfect for him, but Mary's words still hung over me like a storm cloud. I decided I'd talk to her before Bradley got home. I couldn't let this fester, not with him walking through the door in a few hours. I knocked on her door mid-morning, my heart racing. "Mary, we need to talk." No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Mary, come on." The door opened and there she was, her hair pulled back, her face blank. What she said, her tone flat. I took a breath, steadying myself. "We need to talk about what you said at dinner." Her eyes flicked away, then back to me. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said quick. "It was just a comment." I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "It wasn't just a comment, Mary. You insulted Bradley. You insulted this family. And I'm not letting it slide." She crossed her arms, her lips tight. "I said I didn't mean it. What else do you want?" I wanted to yell, to shake her, to make her see what she'd done. But I didn't. I pulled the note from my pocket and held it out. "Read this," I said. She took it slow, her eyes scanning the words. For a second I thought I saw something flicker in her face, guilt maybe, or shame. But then she handed it back and said, "Fine. I'm sorry. Can we drop it?" I stared at her, my chest tight. "No," I said. "We're not dropping it. Not until you understand what you did." She rolled her eyes and that was it. Something in me snapped. "You don't get to roll your eyes at me," I said, my voice rising. "You don't get to sit in my house, eat my food, and talk about my son like he's nothing. Bradley's coming home today and you're going to show him the respect he deserves, or you can find somewhere else to stay." Her mouth opened like she was about to argue, but then she stopped. She nodded once, short and sharp, and closed the door. I stood there, my hands clenched, my whole body buzzing. I didn't know if I'd gotten through to her, but I'd said what I needed to say. For now, that was enough. Bradley's plane landed at 3 p.m. George, Sarah, and I drove to the airport, our car filled with nervous excitement. I tried to push Mary out of my mind to focus on seeing my son. When he walked through the gate in his uniform, his duffel bag over his shoulder, I felt tears sting my eyes. He was taller, somehow stronger, his face lined with the kind of wisdom only hardship brings. I hugged him so tight I thought I'd never let go. "Welcome home, baby," I whispered. He smiled, that same crooked smile he'd had since he was a boy. "Good to be home, Mama," he said. On the drive back, he told us stories about his time overseas, some funny, some heavy. I listened, my heart full, but my mind still half on Mary. I hadn't told Bradley what happened. I didn't want to ruin his homecoming. But I knew it was coming. This wasn't over. When we got home, Mary was in the living room waiting. She stood when Bradley walked in, her smile bright but forced. "Hey, babe," she said, hugging him quick. Bradley hugged her back, but I saw the way his eyes searched her face like he sensed something was off. Dinner that night was tense. Mary was polite, too polite, her laugh too loud, her compliments too quick. I watched her every move, waiting for a slip. Sarah kept the conversation going, talking about her job, her new apartment, anything to fill the silence. George ate quietly, his eyes flicking between me and Mary. Bradley seemed happy but tired, jet lag hitting him hard. After dinner, he went to bed early, Mary following him upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up, my mind racing. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure: Mary's words had changed something in this house. And there was no going back. Bradley's first morning home should have been joyful. I was up at dawn frying bacon and making biscuits, the kitchen filled with the smell of comfort. I wanted this day to be perfect for him, a real homecoming. But the weight of Mary's words still pressed on me, heavy and unyielding. I hadn't told Bradley what she'd said at dinner 2 nights ago. Part of me wanted to protect him, to let him settle in before dropping that bomb. Part of me was scared of what he'd do when he found out. I knew my son. He was calm, steady, but when it came to family, to loyalty, he didn't bend. I sipped my coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the oak tree in the yard, its branches swaying in the morning breeze. I didn't know how this was going to play out, but I knew it wouldn't stay buried long. Bradley came downstairs first, his hair still damp from the shower, his old LSU t-shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. "Morning, Mama," he said, kissing my cheek. "Smells like heaven in here." I smiled, but it felt tight. "Sit down, baby. Food's almost ready." He grabbed a mug, poured some coffee, and sat at the table, flipping through his phone. He looked so normal, so at home, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flicked up every few seconds, like he was waiting for something. I wondered if he'd already sensed the shift in the house. He'd always been good at reading people, especially me. Mary came down next, her steps light, like she was trying not to be noticed. "Morning," she said, her voice too bright. She poured herself coffee and sat next to Bradley, her hand resting on his arm. I watched them from the corner of my eye as I flipped bacon in the skillet. Bradley smiled at her, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sleep, okay?" he asked her. She nodded quick. "Yeah, great." "You?" he shrugged. "Jet lag's kicking my ass, but I'll live." She laughed a little too loud, and I felt my jaw tighten. Everything about her felt forced, like she was playing a part. I set the bacon on the table, along with biscuits and gravy, and sat down across from them. George wandered in a minute later, his newspaper under his arm. "Morning all," he said, his voice gruff. He glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." Breakfast was quiet at first, just the clink of forks and the hum of the fridge. Bradley talked a little about his plans now that he was home, maybe going back to school, maybe starting a business. He'd always been good with his hands, loved fixing things. "I was thinking about opening a garage," he said, spreading butter on a biscuit. "Work on cars, maybe some motorcycles. Something simple." I nodded, proud but distracted. "That sounds good, baby. You'd be great at that." Mary chimed in, her voice sweet. "Yeah, Brad, that's a great idea. You're so good with that stuff." I looked at her, my eyes narrowing. She caught my gaze and looked away quick. Bradley didn't seem to notice the tension, or maybe he did, and was just ignoring it. He'd always been good at keeping the peace. Then it happened. Sarah burst into the kitchen late as usual, her purse slung over her shoulder. "Sorry I'm late," she said, grabbing a biscuit. Traffic was a nightmare. She sat down next to me, her eyes flicking between me and Mary. I could tell she was still mad about the dinner, still waiting for something to give. She took a bite of her biscuit, then looked at Bradley, her face softening. "Good to have you home, big brother," she said. He grinned. "Good to be home, sis." Then Sarah's eyes landed on Mary and her smile faded. "So Mary," she said, her tone sharp, "you gonna tell Brad what you said at dinner the other night, or should I?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected Sarah to go there. Not like this. Not now. Bradley's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What's she talking about?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with something hard. Mary's face went pale. "It's nothing," she said quick. "Just a misunderstanding." Sarah snorted. "Misunderstanding? You called him a loser who couldn't hack it in school. That's what you said about your own husband." The room went still. Bradley set his fork down, slow, his eyes locked on Mary. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice low. Mary opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands twisting in her lap. "I didn't say that," she said finally. "Not exactly. I said some people join the military because they don't have other options. That's all." Bradley's jaw tightened. "And you think that's me?" he asked. Mary shook her head quick. "No, Brad, that's not what I meant. I was just talking. It came out wrong." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her. "Sounds like it came out exactly how you meant it. I wanted to say something to stop this, to smooth it over, but I couldn't." This was between them now. George cleared his throat. "Let's all take a breath," he said, but nobody listened. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "You can't just say stuff like that, Mary, and expect everyone to pretend it didn't happen. You disrespected Brad. You disrespected this family." Mary's face flushed. "I said I was sorry," she snapped. "What else do you want from me?" Bradley held up a hand, cutting her off. "I want the truth," he said. "Do you think I'm weak? That I only joined the army because I couldn't make it anywhere else?" Mary's eyes darted around the table like she was looking for an escape. "No," she said, but her voice wavered. "I don't think that—" Bradley stared at her for a long moment, then pushed his chair back and stood. "I need some air," he said, and walked out the back door. I sat there, my heart racing. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd brought this on herself. Sarah looked at me, her expression a mix of triumph and guilt. George sighed heavy. "Nice work, Sarah," he muttered. She shrugged. "He deserved to know." Mary stood abrupt, her chair scraping the floor. "I'm going upstairs," she said, her voice thick. She left without another word. I looked at George, then at Sarah. "Go check on your brother," I said. Sarah nodded and headed outside. I stayed at the table, my coffee cold now, my mind spinning. I'd wanted Mary to face what she'd said, but not like this, not with Bradley caught in the middle. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew this was only the beginning. Outside, I could hear Sarah and Bradley talking, their voices low. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the hurt in Bradley's tone. I wanted to go to him to tell him none of this was his fault, but I knew he needed space. I started clearing the table, my hands moving on autopilot. George helped stacking plates in silence. "This'll blow over," he said finally. I shook my head. "Not this time, George." She went too far. He didn't argue. He knew I was right. Bradley and Sarah came back in a little while later. Bradley's face was hard, his eyes distant. "I'm gonna take a drive," he said, grabbing his keys. "Need to clear my head." I nodded. "Be safe, baby." He hugged me quick, then left. Sarah sat down at the table, her shoulders slumped. "He's pissed," she said. "Not at you, Mama, but at everything." I sat next to her, my hand on her arm. "You did the right thing," I said. "He needed to know." She nodded but didn't look convinced. I didn't push it. We sat there for a while, neither of us saying much, just letting the weight of the morning settle. Mary didn't come downstairs all day. I didn't go looking for her. I was too angry, too hurt. I spent the day cleaning, gardening, anything to keep my hands busy. But my mind kept going back to Bradley, to the look on his face when he'd heard what Mary said. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I knew he wouldn't let it go. He wasn't built that way. By evening, he still wasn't back. I started to worry, but I didn't call him. He'd come home when he was ready. George and I ate dinner alone, just the two of us, the house too quiet. "He'll be okay," George said, but his voice wasn't sure. I nodded anyway. "Yeah, he will." Bradley came home late after midnight. I was still up sitting in the living room with a book I hadn't read a word of. He came in quiet, his boots heavy on the floor. "Hey, Mama," he said, his voice tired. I stood and hugged him tight. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but his eyes said different. "Just needed to think," he said. "I talked to Mary." My heart skipped. And he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She says she's sorry, but I don't know if I believe her." "Not yet." I nodded. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," I said. "Just sleep on it." He hugged me again, longer this time. "Thanks, Mama." He went upstairs and I sat back down, my heart heavy, but a little lighter. He was home. That was enough for now. The next morning, things felt different. Not better, but different. Bradley was up early helping George in the yard. Mary stayed in her room again. I didn't know what was going to happen between them, but I knew Bradley would figure it out. He always did. I made breakfast again, this time just for the three of us. Sarah came over later and we all sat on the porch talking about anything but Mary. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I kept thinking about the note I'd written, the one Mary had read but hadn't really heard. I didn't know if I'd ever give it to her again, but I kept it in my pocket just in case. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now we were together, and that was enough. A week passed, and the house felt like it was holding its breath. Bradley was home, but he wasn't the same. He was quieter, his laughs rarer, his eyes always searching, like he was trying to piece something together. Mary stayed out of the way, mostly keeping to their room or leaving early for work. I didn't push her, didn't ask her to talk. I was still too raw from her words, from the way she dismissed everything Bradley stood for. But I could feel the tension building, like a storm rolling in, slow and heavy. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know when. Bradley threw himself into fixing things around the house. He rebuilt the porch steps, replaced a leaky faucet in the bathroom, even started repainting the shed out back. I watched him work, his hands steady, his focus sharp. It was his way of coping, I knew, keeping busy. So he didn't have to think too hard about what Mary had said. I helped when I could, handing him tools or bringing him iced tea when the Louisiana sun got too hot. We didn't talk about Mary, not directly, but I could see the weight of it in the way he moved, the way his jaw tightened when her name came up. One afternoon I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for gumbo when I heard raised voices from upstairs. Bradley and Mary. I stopped, my knife hovering over the onions. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp, angry. I set the knife down and wiped my hands on a towel, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to go up there to step in and fix it. Part of me knew this was theirs to sort out. The voices got louder, then stopped abrupt. A door slammed. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Bradley appeared in the kitchen, his face flushed, his eyes hard. "I'm going for a drive," he said, grabbing his keys. I nodded. "Be safe." He was gone before I could say more. Mary didn't come downstairs. I didn't go looking for her. I went back to my gumbo, stirring the pot, slow, my mind spinning. I didn't know what they'd fought about, but I could guess. Her words at that dinner had cracked something in their marriage, something that wasn't healing easy. I felt a pang of guilt, not for Mary but for Bradley. I'd wanted him to know the truth, but I hadn't wanted this anger, this distance. I stirred the gumbo harder than I needed, to the spoon scraping the pot. That night Bradley didn't come home until late. I was in the living room again, my book open but unread. He came in quiet, his shoulders slumped. "Hey, Mama," he said, sitting across from me. I set my book down. "Hey, baby. You okay?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tight. "I don't know," he said. I talked to Mary. Really talked. She says she didn't mean what she said, that she respects what I did. But it doesn't feel right. Like she's saying what she thinks I want to hear. I nodded slow. You think she's lying? He shook his head. Not lying. Just not getting it. She doesn't understand what it meant to me to serve. She never will. I reached out, squeezed his hand. You don't have to make her understand, I said. You just have to decide what you can live with. He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. I know, he said. I'm working on it. The next day, things came to a head. It was Sunday, and I'd invited the whole family over for lunch. Sarah, her boyfriend Mark, even my sister Ellen and her kids. I wanted to fill the house with noise, with love, to remind us all what we were fighting for. Mary helped in the kitchen, chopping peppers and stirring the rice, her movements stiff like she was on autopilot. I didn't say much, just let her work. Bradley was outside with George setting up tables in the yard. The air felt heavy, not just from the heat, but from everything unsaid. Lunch started out fine. The kids ran around the yard chasing each other. Ellen's stories about her new job at the hospital kept everyone laughing. Bradley was quieter than usual, but he smiled when Mark asked him about the army, told a few stories about his time in Germany. Mary sat next to him, her smile tight, her hands folded in her lap. I watched her from across the table, waiting for something to give. And then it did. Ellen asked Bradley about his plans now that he was home. You thinking about staying in Louisiana, she said, passing the cornbread. Bradley nodded. Yeah, probably. I like it here. Thinking about opening a garage, maybe. Mary shifted in her seat, her lips tight. I saw it but didn't say anything. Ellen smiled. That's great, Brad. You've always been good with cars. Mary let out a small huff, barely audible but enough to catch Bradley's attention. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. Something you want to say? He asked, his voice low. Mary shook her head quick. No, nothing. But her tone was sharp, and everyone noticed. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide. Ellen frowned, confused. Bradley leaned forward, his voice steady but hard. No, go on. Say it. Mary's face flushed. I don't know why you'd want to stay here. You could do so much more. The table went quiet. Bradley's jaw tightened. More like what? Like you think I should have done. Instead of joining the army. Mary's eyes widened like she hadn't expected him to go there. That's not what I meant, she said quick. I just think you're better than a garage. Bradley stared at her for a long moment, then laughed bitter. Better than a garage. Right. Because what I've done so far isn't good enough for you. I felt my chest tighten. Everyone was watching now, the kids even stopping their game to stare. Mary's face went red. That's not what I'm saying, Brad. You're twisting my words. He shook his head. No, I'm not. You've made it real clear what you think of me. He stood abrupt, his chair scraping the grass. I'm done. He walked toward the house, his steps heavy. Mary sat there, her hands shaking, her eyes filling with tears. Sarah looked at me, her expression a mix of shock and anger. Ellen reached out, touched Mary's arm. Honey, maybe you should go talk to him. Mary shook her head. He won't listen. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood, my voice calm but firm. Then make him listen, I said. You owe him that. Mary looked at me, her eyes wide, then nodded slow. She stood and followed Bradley inside. The rest of us sat there, the air thick with tension. Ellen sighed. What the hell was that about? She asked. Sarah snorted. Mary being Mary. I shot her a look. Enough, Sarah. She shrugged but didn't say more. George cleared his throat. Let's eat, he said, but nobody moved. The kids went back to playing, their laughter sounding forced now. I sat back down, my appetite gone. I didn't know what was happening inside, but I hoped Bradley was finally getting the truth. An hour later, Bradley and Mary came back out. His face was hard, hers, red and puffy like she'd been crying. They sat down, but not next to each other. Nobody said anything about it, but the distance between them was loud. Lunch went on, the conversation picking up slow. Ellen told another story. Mark asked George about his fishing boat. I watched Bradley and Mary from the corner of my eye, waiting for a sign of what had happened. They didn't talk to each other, didn't even look at each other. When lunch was over, Mary helped clear the table, her movements quick, like she wanted to be anywhere else. Bradley stayed outside with the kids, kicking a soccer ball around his laugh hollow. That night, after everyone left, I found Bradley on the porch, a beer in his hand. I sat next to him, the swing creaking under our weight. "You okay?" I asked. He took a long sip, then nodded. "Yeah, just figuring things out." I waited, giving him space. Finally, he said, "We talked. Really talked. She says she's sorry, but it's not enough. Not this time." I nodded. "What are you gonna do?" He looked out at the yard, his eyes distant. "I don't know yet. But I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me." I reached out, squeezed his shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." He nodded. "Thanks, Mama." We sat there a while longer, the night settling around us. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew Bradley would face it head on. He always did. The next few weeks were a slow burn. Bradley and Mary lived under the same roof, but they might as well have been strangers. He slept on the couch most nights, his duffel bag packed and ready by the door, like he was waiting for a reason to leave. Mary kept up her routine, work, home, work again, but her smiles were gone, her eyes always red, like she'd been crying. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not exactly, but I didn't like seeing the house like this either. It was like walking on eggshells, every word, every look loaded with something unsaid. I tried to stay out of it, to let them figure it out, but it was hard. This was my home, my family, and it was falling apart. Bradley kept busy. He started looking for a space to rent for his garage, driving around town, meeting with realtors. He'd come home late, his notebook filled with numbers and sketches, his face tired but determined. I was proud of him for pushing forward, for not letting Mary's words stop him. But I could see the hurt in him too, the way he'd go quiet when her name came up, the way his hands clenched when he thought nobody was looking. I wanted to fix it, to make it right, but I couldn't. This was bigger than me. One evening I was in the living room folding laundry when I heard them arguing again. It started quiet, just voices through the walls, but it grew louder fast. I set the towel I was folding down and listened, my heart racing. "You don't even try to understand," Bradley said, his voice sharp. "You think you can just say sorry, and it's all fine, but it's not." Mary's voice was high, desperate. "I'm trying, Brad. I don't know what else you want from me." He laughed bitter. "I want you to mean it. I want you to get why this matters." I heard a door slam, then footsteps. Bradley came downstairs, his face flushed, his keys in his hand. "I'm going out," he said, not looking at me. I nodded. "Be safe." He was gone before I could say more. Mary didn't come down that night. I didn't go looking for her. I finished folding the laundry, my hands moving slow, my mind racing. I didn't know how much longer they could go on like this. Bradley was strong, but he wasn't unbreakable. And Mary, she was running out of chances. I went to bed that night, my heart heavy, praying for some kind of resolution. The next morning, Bradley was gone before I woke up. His duffel bag was still by the door, but his truck wasn't in the driveway. Mary came downstairs around noon, her hair a mess, her eyes puffy. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table, staring at the mug like it held answers. I was at the counter kneading dough for dinner rolls, my hands dusted with flour. I didn't say anything, just watched her from the corner of my eye. Finally, she spoke, her voice small. "I don't know what to do, Pat." I stopped kneading, looked at her. "What do you mean?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I keep trying to fix this, but he won't listen. He's so angry." I wiped my hands on a towel and sat across from her. "Can you blame him?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "You hurt him, Mary. Not just with what you said, but with what you think." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't think he's weak," she said. "I never did. I don't get why he's so tied to the army. It's like it's his whole identity." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "It's not about the army," I said. "It's about who he is. He served because he believed in something bigger than himself. And you made him feel like that was nothing. She looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. I didn't mean to, she said. I nodded. Maybe not. But you did. And now you've got to figure out how to make it right. She didn't say anything, just nodded slow. I went back to my dough, my heart a little lighter. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Bradley came home that night late again. He didn't say much, just grabbed a beer and sat on the porch. I joined him, the air thick with the smell of rain. Is found a place today, he said finally. Old warehouse on the edge of town. Good bones. Could be a great garage. I smiled. That's great, baby. I'm proud of you. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. Talk to a lawyer too, he said, his voice low. My heart skipped. A lawyer? He nodded. Just looking at options. In case things don't work out. I reached out, touched his arm. You don't have to decide anything yet, I said. He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. I know, but I can't keep doing this, Mama. It's eating me up. I nodded. Whatever you decide, I'm here. He squeezed my hand. Thanks. We sat there a while longer, the first drops of rain hitting the porch roof. The next day, Mary surprised me. She came downstairs early, dressed nice, her hair pulled back. I'm going to talk to him, she said, her voice steady. I nodded. Good. She left and I watched her go, my heart a mix of hope and doubt. I didn't know if she could fix this, but I hoped she'd try. Bradley was at the warehouse all day working on plans with the contractor. I didn't know if Mary found him there or somewhere else, but when he came home that night, he looked different. Not happy exactly, but lighter. He didn't say much, just hugged me quick before heading upstairs. Mary wasn't with him. I didn't ask. The next few days were strange. Bradley and Mary started talking more, not fighting, just talking. I'd catch them in the kitchen late at night, their voices low, their heads close. I didn't know what they were saying, but I could see the effort. Mary started helping around the house, more washing dishes, taking out the trash, small things but noticeable. Bradley noticed too. I saw the way his eyes softened when she brought him coffee, the way he thanked her, quiet but sincere. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then one night it all came crashing down. I was in bed half asleep when I heard shouting. Bradley and Mary again. I sat up, my heart racing. The words were clearer this time. You can't keep pretending everything's fine, Bradley said, his voice raw. You say you're sorry, but you don't change. Mary's voice was high, desperate. I'm trying, Brad. I'm doing everything I can. He laughed bitter. Everything except understanding. You still think I'm less because of what I did. I heard a sob, then Mary's voice softer. I don't. I swear I don't. But Bradley wasn't having it. I'm done, he said. I can't do this anymore. I heard footsteps, then the front door slam. I got out of bed, my robe pulled tight around me, and went downstairs. Mary was in the living room, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I didn't say anything, just sat next to her. She looked up, her eyes red. He's gone, she said. I nodded. Give him time, I said. But I wasn't sure time would be enough. Bradley didn't come home that night. Or the next. He called to let me know he was okay, staying with a friend from the army who lived a few towns over. I didn't push him, didn't ask when he'd be back. I knew he needed space to figure out what came next. Mary stayed in their room most of the time, coming out only to eat or grab her things for work. The house felt empty without Bradley's laugh, his heavy steps on the stairs. I missed him, but I wasn't worried. He was strong. He'd find his way. Mary surprised me one morning. She came downstairs with a suitcase, her face pale but determined. I'm leaving, she said, her voice steady. I set my coffee down. Leaving where? She took a breath. I don't know yet. I'll tell maybe. I can't stay here. Not after everything. I nodded slow. You talked to Bradley. She shook her head. Not since he left. He won't answer my calls. I didn't say anything, just watched her. She looked at me, her eyes searching. I'm sorry, Pat, she said. For what I said, for everything. I didn't mean to hurt him. I nodded. I know. But you did. She looked away, her hands tightening on the suitcase handle. I'm going to fix it, she said. I don't know how, but I will. I didn't say anything, just stood and hugged her quick. Take care of yourself, Mary. She nodded and left the door closing soft behind her. The house was too quiet after that. George and I went through our routines, but it wasn't the same. I kept busy cleaning, cooking, gardening, but my mind was always on Bradley. I called him a few times, left voicemails telling him I loved him, that I was here when he was ready. He texted back once, "Love you too, Mama." I'm okay. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A month later, Bradley came home. Not to stay, just to talk. He showed up one afternoon, his truck loaded with boxes. Found a place, he said, sitting at the kitchen table. Small apartment near the warehouse. It's not much, but it's mine. I smiled, proud but sad. That's great, baby. You're gonna do big things. He nodded, but his eyes were heavy. I filed for divorce, he said, his voice low. My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. You sure? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. It's not just what she said, Mama. It's everything. I can't be with someone who doesn't see me. I reached out, squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, I said, for knowing what you need. He smiled small. Thanks. Bradley moved out the next week. The warehouse was coming together fast, his garage starting to take shape. He threw himself into it, working late nights, hiring a couple guys from town to help. I visited when I could, bringing food or just sitting with him while he worked. He was different now, not happier exactly, but freer. Like he'd shed something heavy. Mary called me a few weeks later. She was in Baton Rouge, staying with a friend. I'm going to therapy, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in a while. Trying to figure out why I said what I said, why I couldn't see him. I listened, quiet. That's good, Mary, I said. I hope you find what you're looking for. She paused, then said, tell him I'm sorry. Really sorry. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I will. I didn't know if I'd tell Bradley, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure he was ready to hear it. He was moving forward and I didn't want to pull him back. The garage opened 3 months later. Bradley invited the whole family for the grand opening, a small party with burgers and music in the parking lot. Sarah was there with Mark, Ellen, and her kids, even some of Bradley's army buddies. I watched him move through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing, his shoulders loose for the first time in months. The garage was small but clean, tools lined up neat, a sign out front that read Brad's Auto Repair. I felt a swell of pride so strong it hurt. He'd done this on his own in spite of everything. I saw Mary that day. She showed up late, standing at the edge of the lot, her hands in her pockets. I didn't know if Bradley had invited her or if she'd just come. She didn't approach him, just watched from a distance, her face unreadable. I walked over, stood next to her. You okay? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, just wanted to see it. I looked at her, saw the regret in her eyes. He's doing good, I said. She nodded again. I know. He deserves it. She left soon after, didn't say goodbye. I watched her go, my heart heavy, but not angry anymore. She was trying in her own way. That was something. Life settled after that. Bradley's garage took off, words spreading fast about his fair prices and good work. He started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinners here and there. I saw the light coming back to him, slow but sure. The house felt different without him, but George and I filled it with our own routines. Sunday lunches with Sarah, game nights with Ellen's family. I kept the note I'd written all those months ago tucked in a drawer. I didn't need it anymore, but it was a reminder of how far we'd come. One night, Bradley came over for dinner, just the three of us. We sat on the porch after eating, the air cool for once. He leaned back in his chair, a beer in his hand, his eyes on the stars. I'm good, Mama, he said out of nowhere. I looked at him, my heart full. I know, baby, I said. I know. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The storm had passed. We were still standing. If this story hit you, check out the next one on your screen. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for being here.